Welcome to Civilnet. My guest is Alex Sardar, who heads Counterpart International Armenia. Alex, thanks for being with us to talk about an interesting topic.
Sure, thank you.
It's interesting because we're going to talk about local elections that are going to take place in Armenia throughout September, 2 Sundays in September, in several hundred villages, 397, 79, something huge. And this is something that's worth talking about for lots of reasons. One of them is that this is the second full cycle, right? There are now incumbents who are running for re-election. And up to that point, they were appointed. Mm-hmm. Who appointed them?
They were appointed by, let's go back about 15 years. So Armenia has had a local self-government law since 1995. Towards the end of the 90s, the first cycle of elections began. Before then, it was all handled by the central government, by Yerevan, who would appoint district governments, which were left over from former Soviet, the Soviet era, and then so on, and then those governments would provide the services to communities.
So since 95, we've had the law. The elections took place early 2000.
2000, yeah.
And now this is the second round and so forth. What's interesting is that we're the only country in the region that has advanced this far. Mm-hmm. Georgia doesn't have them. Right. Azerbaijan doesn't have them. Right. In fact, I was reading the other day that this is one of the areas where the Georgian opposition is really clamoring for change, that there needs to be more local governance, local accountability. Explain to me why. Explain to me why in a country like Armenia, in a country like Georgia, not too different in the regions, why would somebody want to be mayor of a village where the economic wherewithal is so low?
Sure.
Why do they want to do this?
It's a good question, and it has both it encompasses the resource question, it encompasses the political clout question, and it ultimately answers a larger question of citizenship and governance in general. First of all, there's someone, I was speaking to a colleague of mine today, and she made a very good distinction. She said, always remember that Armenia has local government bodies. Georgia has local government bodies. And that's the distinction that experts in local governance will make. So a lot of countries have local governance. That doesn't mean that it's an elected body of governance, right? So Georgia and Azerbaijan, for instance, are appointed local municipalities. In Armenia, it's elected. It's, the citizens of a community elect their own leaders, their own representatives.
And have expectations of them.
Have expectations of them. They also have responsibilities and tax responsibilities towards that government.
The citizens do.
The citizens do, yes. When Armenia passed the local self-governance law in the late 90s. In fact, in 1996, it passed the first version and then amended it in 2002. In that period, it also became a member of the Council of Europe. And it ratified the Council of Europe Charter on Local Self-Governance. And so Armenia's development as a self-governing local community structure has been directed and led in large part to that charter. And so that's one of the reasons why Armenia has moved very quickly, very rapidly along this spectrum. Now, why would one want to be a mayor or a city council member?
When his resources are so limited.
Very limited resources, but it is also important to note that when you are in a position of power in a community, you also get to control a lot of resources, the outflow of resources, but also how you control the very limited resources that come into that community, right? So,
and these resources are coming into the community largely from Yerevan.
Largely from Yerevan, but indirectly from Yerevan. What happens is communities receive subsidies from Yerevan. They also collect land and property taxes locally. The subsidies are proportionately distributed based on population. There are other factors, population settlements, place of community. When you're a border community, you receive a little more in terms of subsidies and so on. But essentially, that it's a system of subsidies. And when you look across Armenia, no community ever has enough of those subsidies. It can never collect enough land and property tax to make its ends meet, right?
And that elected person at least gets to manage whatever there is.
There is, exactly. So most communities, we work, as you know, we work in a lot of communities, about 58 communities we work in. We work with communities where they have an annual budget of less than $10,000, right? I mean, $10,000 for a small village of 200-300 people might seem a lot. But when you think about the services that a municipality has to provide its citizens, it's not. I mean, you have to keep a staff. You have to collect trash. You have to run a kindergarten. You have to run a local health office.
You have to fix the potholes.
If you ever get to that at the end of the day, right? So it's a very difficult, administrative and resource-wise, it's a very difficult situation. At the same time, though, when you move up to larger communities, cities, places like Goris, places like Vanadz or Gyumri, that's when the stakes become bigger and the political competition goes through the roof, right? Because that's when you really are talking about a lot of resources. Now, again, I want to come back to the point of it's not just about what do you get to manage in terms of resources. It's also where are you able to get the resources? Personally, what else do you get to control in that area? And that,
which is where the power relationships come in.
That's central to understanding political relationships in this country.
Somebody said the other day that one of the mayors said to his minions, don't vote for me in large numbers because then come February in the presidential elections, they're going to expect those same high numbers from me. And so just, don't do it. So in some ways, this is almost not a primary, what's the word I want? It's a dummy run sort of.
Exactly.
You can deliver. Huh?
Exactly. Look, I was thinking about this yesterday, actually, in preparation for our interview. And the Republican Party in the United States, right? In the 1960s and 70s started promoting for its members to enter local government, right? School boards, municipalities, townships, anything, college boards, and so on and so forth, with the strategic objective of getting people through that system, coming up through the state system to the federal system, right? It's no different in Armenia. People understand that all politics is local, right? And so if you want to win the presidency, you need to have structures across the country that function, that will serve the political purposes of your party. How that is communicated might be slightly different in Armenia than it is in other countries, but ultimately that's what the aim is, that a presidential candidate, and certainly an incumbent candidate who has a lot of incumbent mayors and council members will have an advantage in winning small communities. Unfortunately, what happens in Armenia sometimes, and we've talked about this before, people misuse administrative resources and they don't only function in their political role or in their administrative role. They kind of they blur up the lines along that. So
when we talked about the last elections, the parliamentary elections, there was a lot of talk about fraud, bribes, and so forth. Is that an equally critical issue in these local elections, or is this really just more about power relationships?
In larger cities, it may be. In Yerevan elections, for example, which is slightly different, but that definitely was huge community, huge city. In places like Vanadz or Gyumri, Dilijan, it may be. In small communities, we have to remember these are small villages that are practically made up of several families of the same clan, right? So we're not talking about a huge community where no one knows each other and you're going to be coerced into voting for someone. No, you go and vote for your cousin. You go and vote for your grandfather. Whoever's running, grandmother. And
lots of them.
Some of them. This time around there's some of them. There could be a lot more. So that's the reality of elections in these local communities. So no, the same rules don't apply. The same concerns don't apply in these elections. But certainly what does apply is how do people make that decision, and based on what do they go and cast their ballot. Now, a lot of promises are made, just like in any other election, and after the election is when you go and collect the promises from the elected officials. So,
do you notice, when in this last go around, again, the parliamentary elections, we were all commenting that the incumbent parliamentarians didn't run as incumbents. They didn't run on their record. They ran with a whole bunch of new promises. Do you think that in this go around, the incumbent mayors will run on record? Do you get a feel for that?
Yeah, they do run on record, and this is a very good point you're making, because what happens in that local community is so close to people's lives that people know exactly what the truth is. And if the mayor or the council member cannot stand there and say, I did or did not do this, then they're not going to be able to connect with the citizens. And the citizens in Armenia at that level are not shy. I mean, they will hold people to account.
It's their everyday life that's at stake.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I mean, we're talking about, do we have drinking water at home or not? Those are the kinds of issues we're talking about. It's not corruption at an abstract level. It's water to feed to give to my children. It's healthcare. It's school. It's kindergartens. It's roads. It's being able to irrigate your farm. I mean, these are the kinds of issues that people deal with at that level. And so yeah, people do run on their record. We do a lot of community development work. Help them renovate community centers and libraries and so on and so forth. And we see how mayors, as soon as projects are done, they make a big deal about it because that is their record.
Like they're supposed to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it is good that we have this system. It is good that sense of citizen participation, but also accountability from elected officials is starting at that level.
So the Europeans were right. Local self-governance is not such a bad thing.
Who knew?
Alex Sardar knew. Alex Sardar heads Counterpart International in Armenia. We've talked about local elections in Armenia to take place in 2 Sundays in September. And I'm sure this is something we're going to be talking about again throughout September, hopefully with Alex. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Civilnet.